Now, our next story, misinformation can distort national debates on important issues. Chief Justice warns the global rise in misinformation threatens national institutions and processes that underpin democracy, warns Canada's Chief Justice. We can talk, there's a lot in this article. We can talk about it at length, but the core of this is so funny and it's so typical of this Liberal government is they want to control a narrative. They want one message being given out, and they will brand anything in opposition in their ministry of truth. They'll brand anything in opposition, even if it's factual and evidence based, as misinformation. This misinformation term, it's so George Orwellian, it's so 1984, and it's so troubling to see just how quickly the media is to parrot this liberal sentiment. The tackling of misinformation is in fact the tackling of alternative perspectives, the tackling of news, and we aren't too far from the days where 2 + 2 = 4 is going to be calculated as misinformation if it doesn't align with the Liberals' numbers.
Buried in this article is something also very sinister. They like to bury the stuff way down. So the Supreme Court Justice Richard Wagner, quite political for a Supreme Court justice. If you go down about halfway through the article, it says, earlier this year, Wagner attended a conference of judges and court communication officers from across Canada. They were asked if they had observed fewer journalists covering their courts. Well, I'll tell you why that is, because they didn't let us into the courtroom. It went to Zoom court. But anyway, they were asked if they had observed fewer journalists covering their courts. Everyone raised their hands, including representatives of the Supreme Court of Canada, Wagner said. Journalists, however, are not at fault for this trend. There are simply fewer reporters, fewer resources, and they all have to feed the 24-hour news machine on multiple media platforms. So what he's saying here is, even though there's misinformation being published out there, it's not the journalists who are doing the publishing that are the problem. It's the fact that there are not more of these journalists to do it, I guess. And
more state funding.
That I was going to say, what exactly is the implication here? That we should be giving state funding to the journalists to cover the courts, and the courts are more political and liberal than ever.
Yeah. And very often, you and I can attest to this, very often we're the only ones in court
I'm
covering
literally the
these
only
stories.
one there.
Yeah, I've been to court a few times, and there's maybe 1 or 2 other people there. The independent media is the only ones covering this, and these guys getting paid $1 billion from the government, they can't seem to get out and cover these stories.
Yeah. I'm the one getting up at 4:00 in the morning, hiking all the way down 4 hours to Calgary, driving through Calgary rush hour traffic, parking somewhere godforsaken in downtown Calgary to cover a court case where it's in downtown Calgary. I'm reliably informed there's journalists down there, but I routinely end up being the only one covering these court cases because they don't care about these court cases, because these are usually civil liberties court cases. And the mainstream media would love to see these people punished just as harshly as the government would.
Yeah. Now, this isn't exclusive to Canada by any stretch of the imagination. Let's jump into this video of an Australian e-safety commissioner. Oh my gosh. E-safety commissioner, Julie Inman Grant, threatening to find Elon Musk, which, I'm sure that's going to go over well. 700 or 70,000? Maybe it's 700. I thought it was 70,000 a day. If Twitter doesn't rein in online hate. So let's jump to that clip.
We are finding celebration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a line, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, to be free from online violence, or the right of data protection to the right to child dignity. We are finding celebration.
Do you notice the word she used there? First of all, online, when they say safety, what they mean is censorship. So when you said this is very Orwellian, yeah, it definitely is. But they used a word there, online violence.
Yeah.
Mean tweets is what she means. Those are mean tweets, and you can just block those people, mute those people. You don't have to listen to mean tweets. But she's calling that online violence. And in the end, what this will mean is that if she wants to crack down on Twitter this way in Australia, you know what Twitter's going to do? just not be in Australia. And
Yeah.
so you don't have the digital public square for Australians because they have these tyrants as online digital safety officers, which just means censorship officers.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of Orwellian, like just that online, the e-safety, online safety, they're censorship czars. That is absolutely what they are. Listen, within these countries, there are already laws in place. You can't incite violence, even online. You can't promote hatred against groups. But that's not really what they're talking about. That stuff, there's already sort of legal things in place for. This is about questioning, criticizing, doubting the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age that is being pushed and perpetrated by these people. This just brings me back to that the Elon Musk interview where someone's like, "Oh, I've seen more. It's worse than ever now," and he asks for one example, and they can't give any. This is about the fact that they hate that free speech platforms, which Twitter has become again. Rumble is one of those things. They hate the fact that this is clearly not what the majority want. And when the majority have an opportunity to share that, to rally, to stand together, that is a threat to their increasing control. And they thought they had this in the bag. They thought they had this increased monopoly. I think the advent of the internet, YouTube, some of these other platforms challenged that control over the thought that is allowed to circulate within society, but they managed to get their hands on that too. They didn't expect Elon Musk to drop $44 billion and grab Twitter and turn it once again into a free speech platform. They didn't expect Rumble to blow up the way it has and become another free speech platform. Listen, the free market is still going to reign supreme. The government can only throw so much money at stuff, but if people aren't watching it, like we saw during the Alberta elections, 300,000 people watched our stream, far more than any of these other government-funded outlets. They get far more money and have far higher production values than us. People don't want that, so it doesn't succeed. People want this, and they're going to push through it. The government finds all this stuff isn't going to work. And imagine if Twitter did drop out of Australia, the backlash that government would endure.
Maybe they need it. But, look how offended they get when there's just this one place where you could speak your mind in, as I said, the digital public square. The left and the institutional left controls everything else. They control print media, broadcast media, terrestrial media, radio, with the exception of podcasts, all the social medias, and streaming platforms, except for probably Rumble, Locals, and Twitter, really Getter to some extent, although they're a much smaller platform. But Twitter's really the big one because that's where the people who do the news source things and talk to each other, right? And they're so offended that there's this one place that they can't control. Really shows that it's not about online hate. There's no such thing, really. It's about control. It's about controlling the things that you can say and do. And they need complete control. 100%. They can delete their Twitter accounts, by the way. Like, if you think Twitter is this place where you're risking online violence, that it's akin to walking down a darkly lit alley in a gang-ridden neighborhood where drugs and violence reign supreme, you know Edmonton? What you would do? I was going to say, like downtown Edmonton. You just wouldn't go down there. You would do what I do and you just not go down there, especially after dark. If you think Twitter is that in the digital realm, you just wouldn't go there. But you don't think that. It's not that it's scary or violent. It's that people are saying things that you don't like. They might be misgendering somebody or being vaccine skeptics. That's the worst thing that's happening over there. And it's frightening to these people. They really don't think it's violent because then they would just delete their accounts and remain on Instagram.
And one of the things I love is part of this pushback we were talking about. You look at someone like Tucker Carlson, who was the biggest name in news. To think that they could cancel him or at least try to, not even he was safe, but look at this capacity to come back, push back on Twitter and reject this type of cancellation.
Hey folks, that was a clip from the Daily Roundup. That is our live stream show that airs from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday to Friday. I'm usually here for 4 of the shows. Our Alberta team takes over on Fridays. And you know what? You can interact with the hosts. If you give us a small financial donation, we'll read your comment during the live stream. So please go to rebelnews.com/livestream and tune in Monday to Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern.